I'm going to be explaining about the purpose and the approach to the Atlas of Knowledge, and then Dimitris will give a demonstration of the system, which will show some of its functionality and I hope illustrate its usefulness. So here goes. Okay, so why is an Atlas of Knowledge needed within the Research Data Alliance, and who is it aimed at? The motivation really is that because the RDA is community driven, it's bottom-up motivated. The working groups and interest groups originate from communities rather than being imposed from above. It can be quite difficult to make sense of what is going on within the RDA, to find one's way around it, to find useful results in fields of your own particular interest, to understand what the activities are. I think there are around about 80 or 90 working groups and interest groups at the moment. Some of them have overlapping focuses. Some of them correspond in some way to activities of other groups. They have some kind of links with other groups. They work in similar areas in some cases, but with a different perspective. All this can make it quite difficult to understand what the RDA is really doing and what it's producing. So the motivation for the Atlas of Knowledge is to help with that. It's intended not only for newcomers to the RDA, although that's certainly an important target audience, but for anyone, whether they're active in the RDA or not, who wants to find their way around the activities that are going on. And we hope that the Atlas of Knowledge is complementary with some other initiatives that are being taken, which I will mention later. This is a short extract from the list of working groups of the RDA, and I think it highlights some of the issues that I just mentioned. This is simply an alphabetical list of working groups. You can see, for example, that there's one of them, sorry, I have to lean forward here to read my screen, one of them called Exposing Data Management Plans. Now, you may also notice that 2 lines above that, there's a DMP Common Standards Working Group. Of course, you need to know that DMP stands for Data Management Plans. You may not know that, so you might not spot there's a connection there. But in any case, we can see that there are at least 2 groups working on data management plans. What are the connections, if any, between them? How do they contribute to the advancement of data management plans? That's the kind of thing that one would like to know, and is not always obvious just from looking at the lists of groups. You have to be fairly familiar with the activities already in order to understand the relations between these groups. Okay, so there are already some let's say navigational aids for helping understand the RDA. One of them is a presentation which is regularly updated once a month, I think, which is called RDA in a Nutshell, and that can be downloaded from the RDA website. It's a general introduction to the purpose and activities of the RDA, but it also includes a list of interest groups and working groups, which are grouped into various categories. It's called grouped by focus, and you can see in this extract that there's one of the groups is reference and sharing focused. Another one is partnership groups. There are about half a dozen of these groupings, which in some way make it easier to understand which groups are related to each other. Now, there are two interest groups currently, which also have some kind of relationship with the Atlas of Knowledge, in that they're trying to make sense of a wider landscape. One of them is the Mapping the Landscape interest group. Now, the focus here is not so much on the RDA's own activities, but on mapping the landscape of research data infrastructures in general and how they relate to each other. And then there's the Disciplinary Collaboration Framework Interest Group, which I believe is quite recently founded and is looking at commonalities and differences between different disciplines' approach to the problems of research data management. So these groups, they have quite different focuses from the Atlas of Knowledge. They're not particularly looking at the RDA's own activities, but nonetheless, they do have a similar purpose, trying to make sense of a large and rather confusing landscape. And we're hoping that we can work with those groups more closely in future as the Atlas of Knowledge develops and is handed over beyond the end of the current project. Now, speaking of the current project, the Atlas of Knowledge is an initiative within the RDA Europe 3 project. So that project is funded by the European Commission. It's called the European Plug-in to RDA, and it carries out a number of support activities, of which the development of the Atlas of Knowledge is one. Now, the Atlas of Knowledge is intended as a resource for everyone. It's not just for European users or members of the European project. It's a global resource developed within RDA Europe. Now, we have to say that it's under development, that some of the content has been created by the RDA Europe team ourselves, and we've done our best to make sure it's correct and up to date, but we know that it's not absolutely complete or absolutely up to date, and we hope to be working with, for example, group chairs in future to ensure that the content is maintained, and this is something I will mention later in my presentation. So what's our approach to the Atlas of Knowledge? The aim really is to present all of the working groups and interest groups in context and in a very concise way, so that it's easy to understand what they're trying to do and how they relate to each other. The organizing principle is what we call topics. For example, persistent identifiers. There's about 7 or 8 of these topics. Another one is repositories and data management. Groups can belong to more than one topic, and it's possible, as Dimitris will show in his demonstration, to have a visualization of the structure of the topic and the groups that belong to it. So the groups are then represented by short summaries, including their outputs, because we want to emphasize the outputs of the group as something that is usable right now. We want to put that into the foreground. And there's also an interface for editing as well as viewing, which of course requires login and would be used by the Atlas of Knowledge team, or in future by the group chairs, for maintaining and adding content. So what does the Atlas of Knowledge add to the existing resources on the RDA website? Well, we hope that the topic structure is useful for presenting the big picture of how RDA activities are organized and how the groups contribute to them. The summaries of groups are newly written. They are more concise than the summaries that appear on the individual group pages. The group pages, as you know, are working spaces for the group activity. This is where the group activity is carried out. And so it's not necessarily the best way of understanding the motivation of the group, its purpose, what it has achieved. And that's the aim of the Atlas of Knowledge. In particular, there's a focus on outputs where these are available. And as I've said, it's editable online for purposes of maintenance. So turning to maintenance, what needs to be done? Of course, the summary of the group has to be written when a group is set up. It has to be associated with one or more topics. And as an ongoing kind of content maintenance, the outputs should be summarized as they become available. It's possible that the topic structure itself might be updated as time goes on, although we don't expect that to be very frequent. So it's not particularly demanding, but it does need to be done in a timely way. Of course, any resource like the Atlas of Knowledge, it has to be kept up to date. If it's not up to date, then people will not trust it and it will not be used. So this is something that we're looking at for the future. In particular, before the end of the current RDA Europe 3 project, we will be enhancing the current content in cooperation with the group chairs. We will be agreeing procedures for maintenance of the content and probably giving more responsibility to the group chairs, with the Atlas of Knowledge team in more of an editorial role. And we will be looking at options for the future of the application itself and handing it over to the successor project, RDA Europe 4, and for integrating more completely into the RDA website. So at the moment, it has its own URL, which you can see there. I mean, you can go and try that. But at this point, I'll hand over to Dimitris to give a demonstration of the system as it currently exists. So thanks for your attention, and let's have a demonstration, please.
Okay, thank you a lot, Simon. Let's wait now for Dimitris to enable his microphone and start the demonstration of the Atlas of Knowledge system. In case you have some questions already, you can type them in the chat, and then we can discuss them in the end of the whole presentation. Okay, Dimitri, can you hear us? Okay. Please don't forget
hi everyone.
to... Hello.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay. So
Yes.
Let me share my screen. Okay. Jutta? Can you hear my screen? Can you see my screen now?
Can I see your screen?
Okay. So, so this is the homepage, the landing page of the Atlas of Knowledge. It's not officially under the RDA domain, not yet. It will be launched under that domain as well sometime in the future. So, in the first in the home screen, you can see a banner with that depicts different activities that take place within the RDA, such as hackathons, datathons, webinars, and so on. And underneath that, what we see directly is a list of blogs on the left part of the screen, and these blogs contain articles. We'll see what articles are in a few minutes. And on the right part of the screen, you can see a list of supporting information. Like, for example, a blog that depicts all the webinars that are taking place in RDA, and we can see directly what these webinars are all about. And it's possible to link a webinar with a series of articles and so on. Beneath that, we can have a link of relevant RDA links, the RDA mind map, and then a set of news feeds, a news feed, and then a set of social sharing buttons. The Atlas of Knowledge contains a number of information types. the main one is the article. An article is a description of an activity that takes place within an RDA group, working group, or interest group. There is the working group, the interest group itself, topics, as Simon presented earlier, and also we have the outputs. The output is something. It's a concrete output that is produced within a working group or an interest group activity. Let me go into an article. Let's take the first one, for example, the data citation of application. Apart from the preview, the preview that we saw in the dashboard, now we're taken to the article body, which is presented on the left part of the screen, followed by a topic graph. Beneath the topic graph, we have all the relevant RDA groups that were used directly or indirectly in order to produce this activity. And at the bottom of this, all the different outputs that have been produced. It's important to understand that since there are so many different working groups, and of course they are evolving very, very rapidly, these working groups reuse outputs and reuse stuff that are being produced or have been produced by other working groups and interest groups. And in order to be able to track all of these activities and be able to map which activity of which group reuses what, we tried to achieve that by linking the topics, which can be seen here in blue, and these are the blue boxes, with the different working and interest groups that can be seen in green. These are the green boxes, and also the type of relation between them. So, for example, in this activity, the data publication topic is related to the RDA publishing data workflows working group, and specifically through the analyzing workflows and standards for publishing data aspect. So, so by doing this, we have an overall picture of what this article is all about, and what these people have been doing, and how they have been reusing information and data and outputs from all the from the RDA ecosystem. So this is a nice visualization of this output. So this is like, in a nutshell, what this article is all about. Then we have all the relevant RDA groups and what they do. And finally, the outputs. On the right part of the screen, we can, of course, comment on this article. You can add a comment, you have to register, of course, and these comments are moderated. And then we have a set of resources. So, for example, a document, an image, a URI, a link to a GitHub repository, and so on. Let me go back. So, another interesting feature which is under development is the overall map of the RDA. The overall map of the RDA, it's a complete sum of all the working groups, interest groups, topics, and activities that we have in our database. The topic graph that you saw earlier was a subgraph of this RDA map that you see right now, and it was meant like this in order to be able to, hide all the complexities that are involved and show only the specific blocks of information that are required for this specific task. So here you can see working groups, interest groups, topics. You can see different types of relations between each other. We can click on one and then get all the possible articles. You can search, you can do lots of stuff, and you can zoom in, zoom out. It's the challenge here is that you have lots and lots of information, and then we are trying to to find a better user-friendly to deliver an improved user experience in order to navigate through the map and get the necessary information. And of course, another important thing is the management interface, which I'm going to show briefly. This is not open to everyone, not yet at least. There are some requests for working group chairs for possibly that they could have access to this. And then this is the way that we are editing information and writing information. For example, here's the way that we are inputting information about an article, that we edit the topic graph that you saw earlier, and so on. So this is what I had to say. This is what I mean. This is what I have to show. And thank you.